Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 37, printed in House Report number 113-170, offered by Mr. Scalise of Louisiana.
Pursuant to House Resolution 312, the gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Scalise, and a member opposed, each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Louisiana.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And the amendment I bring forward is a very basic, straightforward, common sense amendment that deals with the funding priorities within the Department of Defense. We know we're living in a post-sequester world. We have many hearings here on Capitol Hill where we've got generals and, in fact, even the Secretary of Defense talking about the threats to military operations through the sequester cuts. And we all know that those are real, and especially in these tight economic times, and even if we weren't in tight economic times, but especially right now, we ought to be watching every single dollar that's spent within the Department of Defense and work to find ways to make smarter use of those dollars. One of the things that we've found as we've combed through is that the Department of Defense has been entering into contracts to buy renewable fuels, biodiesel, and other forms of renewable fuels to supplant what are the traditional conventional fuels. The problem is that the contracts that they're entering into are tremendously more expensive to the taxpayer than if they just bought conventional fuel. And so what this amendment would do would be to say that the Department of Defense cannot enter into those contracts to buy non-traditional fuels at these higher costs. And I want to give a couple of examples. I think it's important to note a few of them because this is something that's been happening recently that we found. There is a memorandum of understanding between the Navy, the Department of Agriculture, and the Department of Energy for each of those entities to spend $170 million each to, quote, assist development and support of a sustainable commercial biofuels industry. Now, Mr. Chairman, whatever you think of expanding and developing a biofuels industry, that's not a mission of the Department of Defense, and especially when their budgets are being cut and the generals and the Secretary of Defense is saying that they don't have enough money to form and execute their basic military operations. Yet they're spending $170 million to prop up a failing biofuels industry when they could instead be buying traditional fuels. Just want to give one example of what we call this renewable energy sticker shock. Here you've got furloughs at the Pentagon. The military has grounded the Blue Angels, and yet they have a contract right now to buy renewable jet fuel at $59 per gallon, $59 per gallon, when the traditional cost of conventional jet fuel is $3.73 per gallon. And yet the military, to carry out some kind of social agenda, is spending an extra $56, almost $56 more per gallon so that they can buy renewable fuel. And so this is one example of many where the military is not making the smartest use of their military dollars at a time when Secretary Hagel himself has testified before a committee that the services have begun to significantly reduce training and maintenance of operating forces. So if they're reducing the training and maintenance of operating forces, why are they spending hundreds of millions of dollars to prop up a renewable energy industry that's clearly not viable yet? One day it will be, but today it's not. And yet they're spending, in some cases, 5, 10, 12 times more to buy this renewable energy than they can buy for conventional, wasting hundreds of millions of taxpayer dollars. And this amendment just says that has to stop. And with that, I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman